Hello friends, my name's Emile and welcome to another ETCC recap, this time taking a look at rounds 5 and 6 that occurred at the Lime Rock Full Alternative course on the 23rd of June 2017. As always, if you'd like to get involved in ETCC, there is a link to a video in the description in which you can do so. So, with that all being said and done, let's go take a look at the starting grid for the Lime Rock race. We have on pole position EVR Visible AK in the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco, up from DJ Yuko in the Speedtrap Motorsports Mazda 3. Prod EKR, a new addition to the series, in the new addition again, Honda Civic. GTO Out of Nowhere returns from Brands Hatch in the 306 Racing Peugeot 308. CR27 Gaming in the CR27 Racing IS300. Harry K5 in the Pinker as always. Afternoon 7 in the Aerodynamics Racing BMW M235i. Renault GT4 in the Team SFR BMW M235i. HP Pinder in the Pinder Racing Peugeot 308. Microlin 100 in the Max Power Racing Scirocco. Azza 9K in the Twitch Motorsports Lexus IS350. Jimmy T 1996 in the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza. Prod Forza 4 AMG in the Prod BMW M235i. Me in the Reverse Gear Autosport Ford Focus. Racing Kart GT in the Privateer Subaru Impreza. And finally rounding out the grid is a Blitz Skyline R54 in the Bay Racing Volkswagen Scirocco, who starts all the way down in 16th place. 16 cars on the grid means this was the biggest grid we've had in ETCC so far. So there you go, you can see the information at the top screen. This is Lime Rock Alternative, conditions are dry, and we are set for a 17 lap race here. So, the Lime Rock Full Alternative course would pose some issues. You see, Lime Rock Normal is a very free-flowing track, however the alternative track adds two very death-dealing chicanes into the mix. We are coming up to chicane number 1 now, following aboard the Prod Civic, and I was hoping to get through without any issues, however there was issues. There was colossal issues. It looked like GTO Out of Nowhere got bumped by this Civic a little bit, looked like a bit of a lag bump. However, the real chaos behind there, I'm not too sure what actually caused that. I believe it's the Aerodynamics Racing BMW going around. Unfortunately, the biggest victim of that pile-up would be the Twitch Motorsports Lexus IS350, who also had an abysmal day at Sebring. Didn't get off to the best start here either, getting thrown 500 foot into the air by a Subaru Impreza. That was a very laggy collision. That would completely kill the Twitch Motorsports Lexus. The Underground Racing Subaru Impreza, not as dead, but I believe he did still sustain some pretty major injuries, and that would rule the Twitch Motorsports Lexus IS350 out of the points once again. So, after that calamity, the grid would be split into a couple of packs. You'd have the lead pack, who ran away at the front, unaffected by the issues. You'd have this pack that we're in right here, which is sort of the main pack, and then you'd have the sort of low runners pack, the behind people, who was having their own successful races as well. Of course, as you can see, this sort of grid pack is led by GTO Out of Nowhere in front in the 306 Racing 306, with the Bay Racing Scirocco at least for 5 seconds. I don't know how he ended up in that wall there. The Pinker also decides to take a dive off the track as we follow aboard my car. That sort of led into a bit of a collision between the Privateer Impreza and the Team SFR BMW, which would allow me to sort of escape a little bit from that pack, chasing down the 306 Racing Peugeot 308 as we jump on board the Team SFR car, who was battling with the Privateer Impreza and the Aerodynamics Racing BMW. The Team SFR driver is the slightly quicker of the two. However, between the Privateer Impreza and the Aerodynamics BMW, there really isn't too much to tell between them. You will see during this race a couple of cars diving into the pits. Those are the cars that were really horrendously broken from that first chicane issues. As the Impreza manages to dive up the inside of the BMW, it won't be too long before the BMW managed to get that position back with a little bit of a nudge, putting himself on the inside for that corner, and luckily being able to jump across just in time in front of the Impreza in order to lead the battle once more. The Subaru Impreza and the BMW actually pretty similar vehicles in the way they drive. They are fairly average. As far as the rear-wheel drive cars go here, once again, the 306 Racing Peugeot ends up in the tyre stack. That admittedly was my fault. I tried to go too wide for that chicane. He ended up going a bit wide. I decided to try and wait up for him. But by the time I was starting to wait up, I noticed the angry pack of cars coming towards me, and I just had to step on it. So apologies to you, Mr. Peugeot driver. However, it did mean that I was in this battle here, ducking in between that privateer Impreza and the aerodynamics BMW. Once again, the Impreza would try to look for a move again, but luckily the BMW was so far forward he managed to cover that sort of inside pretty easily, and well, manages to maintain his position as he tries to get a little bit of a lead away from the Impreza, who now sort of has to defend from me as well as trying to attack the SFR BMW. I would find the aerodynamics BMW and we'd get involved in a little battle a bit further back. Speaking of further back, further down the grid, we found the people who were sort of more majorly affected by those issues at the start. We are aboard a newly livered Pinder Racing Peugeot. There is a couple of other cars rocking different liveries. This one's pretty cool. It's like a Martini inspired 308, which is a really cool livery. I believe the Max Power Racing Scirocco had like a Lancia Stratos theme livery as well. And there was a couple of other changes here and there. The Speed Trap to Motorsports Mazda 3 also saw some slight improvements to its livery. As you can see, the straight line speed of the Scirocco trying to beat out that Mazda 3, who looked like he outbraked himself, but it actually seemed to have helped him sort of make a cutback on the Scirocco. I don't know if maybe the Scirocco maybe broke a little bit too hard, sort of cutting down his speed a bit too much into that first corner, which allowed the Mazda 3 to maintain the position. We see newcomer to the race, CR27 Racing, behind the Pinder Peugeot, trying to find a way around him as the Underground Racing Subaru goes for a little bit of a rally crossing. Yeah, the CR27 Racing Lexus would be a newcomer, would be sort of a little bit unlucky in these couple of races later on. I believe sort of grid position wise these guys were battling for sort of the top of the teens, as the Bay Racing Scirocco gets bumped wide by the CR27 Racing Lexus. That was no part of his fault whatsoever. The Bay Racing Scirocco just tried to join the track at the wrong time and ended up countering a Lexus, and he came off much worse than the Lexus, which I guess is a good thing. But yeah, it would be the Speed Trap Motorsports Mazda 3 that would lead this pack. Performance-wise, we don't really know how the Mazda 3 is doing as of now. I don't really know what its advantages is over the other front-wheel drive cars, but we'll probably see them come into their own at some point. They do have the second most power of the front-wheel drive cars. Or are they the most powerful front-wheel drive? I don't actually know. Anyways, we join the lead battle here, which would go on between the, well, surprise surprise, the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco and the Prod BMW. These guys are currently in the tippy-toppy of our championship. The EVR Scirocco made a hell of a comeback at Sebring, managing to win both races in a row, and he was looking to get a hat-trick here in this first race here at Lime Rock. However, the Prod BMW would not let him do it that easily. Of course, the Scirocco's and the BMWs, some of the most successful cars on the grid, dependent on the driver. The Prod BMW may very well be the most consistent driver in this series, with EVR being another one. He is a very, very quick driver when he's on it, and Microlin 100 is up there as well. But yeah, this would be a rather entertaining battle, rather close fought battle. Obviously, these guys being somewhat experienced know how to give each other just the amount of racing room and so on needed, and still be able to drive very, very aggressively. Very good line from the Scirocco through that corner there. People were having issues through this sort of first section with understeer, and it's kind of understandable. This is sort of a medium speed flowing section. Meeting the focus, I just sort of found the best idea was to basically just let off the power for pretty much that entire section, to allow the car to get around. You can see sort of the Scirocco having the lead into that section, but coming out the section, the BMW can just get the better runs out of the corners than Scirocco. Of course, the Scirocco, while it may be one of the fastest front-wheel drive cars accelerating-wise in a straight line, it is, in my opinion, the worst handling of all of the front-wheel drive cars, which around this circuit meant that the Volkswagens may not have been quite as dominant as they have been around some other circuits. But once we get onto the straight, of course, it would be the straight line speed of that Scirocco which allowed it to just pull away from the prod BMW. Once again coming into the first corner, trying to look around the outside of the Scirocco. That is quite a brave move to make. He manages to get too wide onto here, a little bit of a bump though. Would actually see him take the position, surprisingly enough. He is very lucky that sort of didn't bounce off at any other angle, otherwise that car would have been pinged across. On board with the Team SFR BMW, and he managed to escape from our pack and found, well, the Civic for him to have a little bit of a battle with. These two guys were essentially at it all night, and this is the very first you'll see of their antics. Similar to me and Racing Heart GT in the last race, these guys could not leave each other alone, really. I was interested to see how the Civic would cope on its first round here at ETCC. Of course, it was absent for both Brands Hatch and Sebring, but it was looking to make one hell of a debut. This was the battle for third. I believe it was third or fourth. But yeah, the Civic already making a hell of a debut, managing to sort of be battling up among these guys. The Civic is the best handling of all of the front-wheel drive cars. It's the interesting fact, it is the only front-wheel drive car here to run 245 tyres instead of 255s, which is what every other car runs. But despite that, thanks to being the lowest on power, it is actually the best handling of all the front-wheel drive cars here, and obviously it is battling with the BMW, one of the more average of the rear-wheel drive cars. Maybe slightly more biased towards handling is the BMW than the Subaru, which I believe got slightly more straight line speed. I don't really know. I did test these cars. They're all running within a second of each other. No car really has a significant advantage over the other, but they do have that certain little thing that does make them a little bit sort of different. They're not all exactly the same. As you can see, the Civic through the second chicane is a very, very quick car indeed. It does manage to pull through that chicane very, very nicely. I was finding the front-wheel drive cars were very, very good through the second chicane, maybe the rear-wheel drives being slightly better through the first chicane, just because they can sort of power out of it a little bit better. Whereas the front-wheel drive cars can get a little bit of a better start out of the second chicane. Anyways, once again, joining on board CR27 Racing, who had found the Bay Racing Scirocco, who he had managed to pile off the track earlier, not his fault again. Now, these guys were looking to have a bit of an interesting battle. This was right down towards the back of the field. I'm not quite sure on grid positions here. This may have been for around position 13th, I want to say. Of course, with the Twitch Motorsports Lexus IS350 being retired. And unfortunately, the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco would also end up dropping out in this race, which was a bit of an issue. However, speaking of issues, the CR27 Racing Lexus would have a big issue through there. He managed to fail race it. I'm not quite sure how. It did look like a laggy collision. The Scirocco is absolutely fine. But yeah, that would be another Lexus killed by lag, meaning both Lexuses were out of the points for the Manufacturers' Cups for this round number 5, as he drive into the pits to try and salvage what he can of his race. The Pinder Racing Peugeot would somehow get ahead of the Speed Trap Motorsports Mazda 3 again, which meant the Mazda had to go on the attack. So this is the most powerful front-wheel drive car here. However, straight line speed wise, it doesn't appear to be any quicker than any of the others, really, but handling wise as well, it doesn't seem too bad. If I sort of had to guess, I would imagine similar to the Ford Focus, the Mazda 3 is just a very average front wheel drive car. Maybe slightly more biased towards speed than the Focuses at the cost of very, very slight handling. Of course, for those of you who don't know, in real life, the Mazda 3 and the Ford Focus both share chassis. You can see the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco there, unfortunately lagged out. However, this would showcase one of the other issues we had in this race. People were getting lapped, and this was quite a sort of normal thing. As you can see, the Max Power Racing Scirocco trying to get around these guys. Now, that was a pretty clean one. However, as you'll see later, there were some slight instances of people not giving room to people trying to lap them, which is just a general rule I would like to throw out there. If you do see sort of someone coming up behind you who is a lap up on you, just move out the way for them. I get if you're in a battle, you do want to stay in that battle, but if you're both going to move out the way, then there shouldn't be an issue there. Once again, you would see two lappies behind them, the Civic and the Team SFR BMW once again having a battle. The Civic somehow managing to make its way in front of the BMW at some point. Yeah, those guys were just going at it for pretty much the entire race, really, as they would both try to look around, getting around the Mazda 3, who would lock up very slightly through chicane number 1. However, that would eventually be a good thing, as it would get him out the way so that the other guys could go past, as they would go and try and get around the Pinder Peugeot. Of course, this battle is still going on between DJ Yuko and the Pinder Peugeot, who is somewhere over there. However, there would be a bit of an incident. Not quite sure what happened there. Maybe someone tried to pass the Peugeot a little bit wrongly, sending the Peugeot out a bit. And yeah, that would mean a collision between the Team SFR, BMW, Pinder Racing Peugeot and the Civic. However, that would not break this battle apart. Even something as trivial as that would not break this battle apart, as they would keep going. CR27 Racing would also end up lagging out of this session, I believe. A very, very bad performance for the Lexuses all round there. 1 lag out and, well, 2 lag kills for the both of them. The Civic managing to get a bit of a lead from that crash, but of course Team SFR was not going to let that Civic out of his sights as he goes chasing him down. Yeah, it is quite nice to see the Civic finally here in the ETCC. It has been a long time coming. Not quite sure while everyone was avoiding the Civic. I thought it would have been one of the more popular cars here, but there you go. But yep, that does actually mean, I believe in this race we had one of every single car running here in ETCC, which is quite nice. But anyways, I digress, as this battle would continue on. The BMW trying to catch up to the Civic once again. I believe he's actually coming up on another back marker, which you can maybe see in the distance. I could have swore I saw a car moving around there. But yeah, the Civic would be a very quick car, actually, as it turns out. I was expecting Lime Rock to be the quickest course for the Civics. Obviously, being the best front-wheel drive cars, this is the shortest course on our calendar. So it wouldn't surprise me if these cars ended up even taking the pole position in their first ever debut. Oh, they're catching up on the Mazda 3. Of course, they passed the Mazda earlier on in the race, but that Peugeot calamity managed to mean that the Mazda got around them. Looking to get around him cleanly this time, the Mazda does stay over to the side while the Civic can pass, letting the Civic pass. The BMW tried to use him for slipstream and eventually get past him as well. I would find my rival from Sebring. I would find the Privateer Subaru Impreza once again. This was the battle for 5th, I believe it was. Between me and the Impreza. Again, as I mentioned in the Sebring race, me and the Privateer Impreza driver, we are kind of similar when it comes to driving skill, and that does result in some pretty good battles, as well as the fact that statistically The Focus and the Impreza are pretty close. They have, I believe there's 1 horsepower difference in it, and a couple of pounds of weight. There really is not much between the Impreza and my Ford Focus, save for, of course, the differing drivetrains. You can just see how much of an advantage the front-wheel drive cars can really pull out of that second chicane, as that sort of lag-killed Lexus from earlier is just creeping around there. I believe he was just trying to get a best sort of view that he could on the race. Yeah, the amount of speed that those cars can sort of pull from there is pretty incredible. However, our winner would eventually go on to be Prod in the BMW. After the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco would die, it would allow him to get the lead and sit there pretty comfortably with no one really around to challenge him. So yeah, another Prod victory would mean that Prod Forza 4 AMG would be the second man in the history of ETCC to win 2 races, along with, of course, EVR Invisible AK. This Civic versus BMW battle would not be over, even going on to the final lap. The BMW managing to catch up very, very quickly up to the back of the Civic, and once again, they would go ahead and have a bit of a fight. BMW looking to use the slipstream, trying to get past that Civic. He does know he has the slightly better straight line speed, but it would not be enough. Eventually, the Civic would go on to win that race. However, quite annoyingly, the Drivatars would eventually do the overtake for the Team SFR BMW, as he would get in front of the Civic, and hell, even the Drivatars are having a little bit of a battle there. So all around, a bit of a messy race, but it did result in some very, very good battles between a couple of similar drivers. Obviously, we will take a look at the points at the end of round 6, but here is the leaderboards for round number 5. It would be Prod Forza 4 AMG who will take first place with the BMW. Just 18 seconds behind him would be Michael in 100 in the Volkswagen Scirocco, and 17 seconds behind them would be the Prod EKR in the Honda Civic, with a Rhino GT4 just behind him, having that very good battle as we documented earlier. I would get a 5th place, up from Racing Heart GT, who would get 6th. We would have a battle, but eventually the Subaru would fall back in the final couple of laps. GTO out of nowhere, despite being cannon fodder for the chicanes, would get a very respectable 7th, which is a pretty good position, considering he is making his comeback to the series after being absent from the Sebring race. Afternoon 7th would get an 8th position in a pretty lonely 8th position at that. Blitz Skyline R34 would get his best position of the ETCC so far, coming in a 9th place in his Scirocco, up from DJ Yuko in 10th in the Mazda 3. From him, we have Pinder in 11th with his Peugeot 308. Harry K5, the Pinkatia, would have a pretty abysmal race, and would Jimmy T 1996 in the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza. Of course, we had 3 retirees as a 9K, CR27 Gaming, and EVR Invisible AK would all have to retire from the race for one reason or another. Moving on to round number 6, here is the grid position. Starting on pole is Afternoon 7 in the Aerodynamics Racing BMW M235i, up from Prod EKR and the privateer Honda Civic. Team SFR's Rhino GT4 would start on 3rd behind his rival in the Civic. GTO out of nowhere would start in 4th in the 306 Racing Peugeot 308. CR27 Gaming would return once again with the CR27 Racing Lexus IS 350 with DJ Yuko in the Speedtrap Motorsports Mazda 3. I would start in a very good 7th in the Reverse Gear Autosport Ford Focus. EVR Invisible AK would return in the Virtual Racing Scirocco. Blitz Skyline R34 in the Bay Racing Scirocco. Prod Forza 4 AMG in the Prod BMW. Jimmy T 1996 hoping to have a better race in the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza. Micro 100 in the Max Power Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. HP Pinder in the Pinder Racing Peugeot 308, up from the Pinkatia Ford Focus ST of Harry K5. Racing Heart GT would start in 15th, with the Switch Motorsports Lexus IS 350 getting some more bad luck, starting in 16th. So we are getting underway for round number 6 once again at Lime Rock, this time 16 laps plus 1 forced pit stop, similar to round number 2. Round the first corner, we wouldn't even make it round the first corner, as everything would go very, very wrong. The Peugeot would end up getting into a slide, and that would kill pretty much everything. Yeah, I don't even know what happened there. On my screen, all I saw was the CR27 racing Lexus get very sideways, and then I crashed into that, and then all hell broke loose. It would mean the Prod Forza 4 AMG would have a bit of a poorly car, and it would once again kill the Twitch Motorsports Lexus IS 350, taking him out of this race once again. Very unfortunate for him. Hopefully at Nürburgring GP he can cope a little bit better. However, it wouldn't all be bad news. The Underground Racing Subaru Impreza would manage to survive the second chicane and manage to survive that calamity to be involved in this battle pack here between every single car pretty much in the field. Surrounded by me in my Ford Focus, along with the privateer Subaru Impreza, who was breathing down his neck, as well as the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco, a bit pissed off that he had to drop out of the last race. He was looking to make up time and yeah, not let that hold him back. The Mazda 3 would unfortunately get tapped out a little bit wide there. Just the racing incident, that's just what happened. Well, the Mazda 3 had sim steering on as well, which probably didn't help in that matter, although to be fair I run sim steering as well. Some people don't, some people do. I personally just run it because I quite like it. Another Subaru would try to go for a little bit of rallycross then. I don't know what it is about Subaru touring cars and going rallycrossing, but they all seem to do it. You know, these, the Levorgs in ETCC, they all like to go for a little bit of rallying every now and again. Maybe that's just because as well Subarus are for rallying and they don't want to be touring cars or something like that. Either way, he would come under pressure from the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco, who was looking to make his way up the grid and charge after whoever was in the lead at the time. I believe it was the Aerodynamics Racing BMW M235i. Despite being tapped out wide in that first corner, that would actually help him avoid most of the accidents towards the back. Indeed, as we join aboard this sort of battle for position here, the Max Power Racing Scirocco starting pretty low down on the field and also getting involved a little bit in those calamities, was looking to make his way up the field. He managed to finish a second in the last race, despite having some pretty serious issues damage-wise from that first chicane issue. Luckily this time though, the car looks pretty much okay, as he looks to go to battle amongst the Aerodynamics BMW. Of course, we've seen Scirocco versus BMW many times before in this series, and we know how realistically it's going to turn out. The BMW is going to do better through the corners, and then we're getting onto the final straight, and this is where the Scirocco is looking to use its straight line speed, looking to go all the way around the outside of the BMW, which is a rather impressive manoeuvre. Of course, the BMW driver there should also be commended for allowing the Scirocco a fair bit of room through there, as he does try to look away round the Scirocco. The BMW will get a better run out of these corners, which is something the Scirocco driver must be pretty mindful of. I have actually heard a couple of sort of issues from people driving these Sciroccos, saying that they do actually understeer a little bit, and it could be quite easily fixed with tuning. But you know me, I can't tune for crap, and also I kind of like the fact that these cars all have a little disadvantages. We don't want the Sciroccos to be retardedly overpowered, so they are not. Anyways, the BMW would try to get around the Scirocco, but it wouldn't really happen, as the Prod Civic would come into sight for the Scirocco, looking to munch him up completely. Again, as we've discussed earlier, the Civic is the best handling of the front-wheel drive cars. However, it is the least powerful, which does make it susceptible to attacks from quicker cars. Speaking of quicker cars, I had a bunch of them bearing down on me. I had two Sciroccos and an Impreza bearing down on my mighty Ford Focus. Of course, the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco was one of those cars. Now, I knew he would probably try to mincemeat me as soon as we got onto any straight, and this here, this is a straight despite having a curve. I was looking to slow the grid down quite a bit coming in to chicane number 1. Somehow the Bay Racing Scirocco and the Impreza would take each other out, which was pretty advantageous for me, as it meant all I had to worry about was the Scirocco on my tail. Admittedly though, the Scirocco is quite a scary problem to be worrying about as we come up to the straight once again. However, I would dive in for my mandatory pit stop and completely cock up my pit entrance because, well, it's me. I had to cock it up somehow. A few people ended up doing that actually. Once again, on board with the 306 Racing Peugeot, who came off arguably one of the worst from that first corner collision. He was looking to make his way up the field, and indeed he was doing, as he would spy onto the back of the Speedtraps Motorsports Mazda 3 once again. Despite being the only Mazda in this series, the Mazda has got a hell of a lot of screen time during this sort of race here. He got involved in quite a few of the battles and so on and so forth. Anyways, as the Peugeot would try to look for a way past the Mazda, as we've discussed before, Peugeot arguably the rear-wheel drive car with the most traction. It does actually mean it gets some of the best runs out of the corner that you'll get from any rear-wheel drive car, which around Lime Rock, that is a pretty good trait to have, as he would stare at the back of the Mazda 3 and look to make his move around the outside. He does tap the Mazda a little bit wide by the looks of it, but the Mazda receives no major issues, and to be fair, either way, the Peugeot was going to make that pass. The Team SFR BMW would somehow find his way into the lead, with a couple of the cars sort of pitting further back, as well as him sort of coming off not quite as bad through that first corner calamity. He would find his way to the top spot during race number 2 here at Lime Rock. A little bit of an issue there, seemingly would, unfortunately though, opening him up to the Max Power Racing Scirocco, who went past him quite quickly. Yeah, you do not want to make cock-ups if you are in the lead, because you will encounter some issues. Unfortunately, you would end up tripping up the Civic, and, well, I bet you can't see where this is going. Oh yes, even in this race, there was another Civic versus SFR battle. Although, to be fair, I'm really not complaining, because these guys can battle until the sun goes down, and I will still be very much entertained by it. Admittedly though, the BMW would still have his sights focused on that Max Power Racing Scirocco, looking to get around it, looking to get him done. A little further back from those guys though was the Aerodynamics BMW, of course being tripped up in that first corner calamity, and eventually just falling back through the grid. He would find himself battling with the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza. And as we've discussed, there, that was quite a nasty accident there from the Civic. I'm not sure what actually happened there, whether he was just trying to enter the pit lane and managed to do it a little bit wrong, or if that was just an accident that happened and he was trying to get himself back around it. Either way, the Aerodynamics BMW would also find that incident to be quite spectacular, as he runs right into that first corner, which does allow the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza to overtake, but he is far from done with him. He is sick of losing positions to people and would try and dive up the inside of the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza. Admittedly though, that car was already having a couple of issues, and a bounce off the BMW would certainly not help battles. That was no way the BMW's fault, that was just the Subaru getting a little bit out of shape and unfortunately colliding with the side of the BMW. Now he would find himself under attack from the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco. I'm not quite sure what position this is for. I believe this is fairly high up the grid. This may be for like position 3, I want to say. Either way, the Aerodynamics BMW would drop into the pits for his mandatory pit stop. I believe this was around over halfway through the race now. So essentially we were just seeing the final cars pit in. Forza 4 AMG would have a good recovery drive on his hands, of course, coming off one of the worst in that first corner issue. In fact, his car got piled into quite a bit. I would assume there was a fair bit of damage done to the BMW. He may have had to take his pit stop early, but he was looking to run his way up the field as he encounters Afternoon 7's BMW, the privateer Super Impreza. You can see the Underground Racing Super Impreza just behind that, as well as the Civic. looking to munch on the other BMW. Despite being equal cars, they certainly are not drivers of equals. Not saying that the aerodynamics BMW driver is bad, but you know, the Prod BMW driver is probably the quickest guy we have in this series currently, as he chases once again on the tailbones of a Subaru Impreza, trying to get around the privateer one, who desperately tries to cling on for life. This was actually pretty high up the grid, I want to say. The Subaru would get it slightly wrong on a curb, allowing the BMW to step all over his rear end. However, Subaru does a pretty good job of trying to seal the gaps. Manages to seal that gap through there. BMW tries to look for a way around through the next corner. Doesn't quite work. The the Subaru would go onto the dirt again though, and that would allow Prod to make the position and then lag. Not really sure what happened there. It looked like the white BMW managed to bump the Prod BMW into the privateer Impreza. Privateer Impreza coming off the worst of all of that. However, it would at least mean that these four guys would get very, very intimate and close with each other. We would see the two Prod guys fighting one another, as well as trying to get around that aerodynamics BMW, the Underground Racing Super Impreza, having a little bit of a tyre smoke moment around there. As we move through the field once again, we would see some more back markers. I believe this was the Team SFR BMW starting to pass the Pinder Racing, Peugeot and Mazda, as the Team SFR BMW would finally make his dive into the pit. I believe he may have ended up getting the position on the Max Power Racing Scirocco once again, as the Scirocco dropped into the pits, but of course he would have to drop into the pits at some point, allowing the Max Power Racing Scirocco around him once again. It would be a little bit of a lonely race. However, towards the back of the field, there really wasn't much going on in this sort of lower half of the grid. Everyone would get a bit spread out. You see the privateer Impreza, who unfortunately, due to that lag crash, would essentially confine him to the bottom spots of the race. The Pinder Peugeot would just sort of be milling around. I believe this was around 11th place, 11th position. And of course the Speed Traps Motorsport Mazda 3 not too far behind, because whenever you see a Pinder Peugeot, you will see a Speed Traps Motorsports Mazda 3 somewhere in that mix. But nevertheless, he was still going around, he was still trying to gain positions as much as he can, just do his hot lapping and hopefully make up some time so he can get near a couple of cars. So we join the lead battle then. The Max Power Racing Scirocco, as mentioned previously, would end up passing the Team SFR BMW, I believe, while he was in the pits. However, he wasn't too far off coming out of the pits, and that would mean that this battle for first place would rage on between Scirocco and BMW once again. It's not like we've seen this battle a million times. However, no matter how many times we see it, it is still a pretty exciting state of affairs. The Scirocco looked to get things a little bit wrong through that first chicane, allowing the BMW to try and make a move on him. However, the acceleration at Scirocco can still overcome that mistake as they come around the second chicane. As far as sort of going through that second chicane, I did say front wheel drive cars are quicker. The Scirocco is probably the slowest car through that second chicane, which does mean the rear wheel drive cars can actually stick to them relatively easily, as we would see. The BMW trying to stay on him through the straight. We know that won't really work. However, through the corners, it could potentially happen. We go a little bit further down, as the Bay Racing Scirocco would go on to have a little bit more bad luck. He did pretty well in round number 5, despite having some bad luck in that race. However, he would have a bit more bad luck in round number 6. Of course, we see the 306 Racing Peugeot 308 and a couple of others behind him. He would just outbrake himself into the chicane, as well as the Peugeot, incidentally, who I believe that's the third time he's managed to do that today, at least on camera. Well done to you, sir. You can win some form of award for funniest something, I don't know. Anyways, so the Scirocco, thinking that he would be okay after that, would end up locking up into chicane number 2 and going for a little bit of a rallycross. Yeah, really not a very good lap for the Scirocco there. However, one Scirocco would have a very good race, and that was the Max Power Racing Scirocco, who would go on to lead for the rest of the race from the Team SFR BMW. The SFR BMW always keeping him honest, but it simply would not be enough, as the Scirocco would go on to win round number 6 of the ETCC, going for a rather spectacular finish there, trying to get the car to roll maybe, but yeah, well done to you, sir, for winning. In fact, that's our third person to win 2 rounds in a row. I believe only 3 people have won in the ETCC, but never mind. However, he would have his work cut out if he wanted most spectacular finish of the day. I would not be outdone on that. I would end up finishing in 7th position, down on a couple of guys. Yeah, I didn't have the best of race. I would have a pretty lonely race as well, but I would admittedly have a rather excellent finishing thing. Yeah, I decided to go for a little bit of a roll myself after CR27 and his rather crazy roll. I had a pretty making sense roll, but it was still pretty good. Anyways, here's the leaderboard for round number 6. It would be Microlin 100 who would win the race, and down from Team SFR's Rhino GT4 in 2nd. EVR Invisible AK would get 3rd place, down from Prod Forza 4 AMG, who would finish in 4th despite getting the quickest lap of the race. Prod EKR would finish in 5th, up from GMT 1996 of the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza, who would get a very respectable 6th. I would get a somewhat lonely 7th position, managing to sort of clear off earlier in the race. Yeah, I just had nothing around me. As you can see, 10 seconds quicker was the Underground Racing Impreza, and 15 seconds behind me was Afternoon 7 in the Aerodynamics BMW M235i. CR27 Gaming would have a pretty good result, going into 9th, managing to get the likes of some manufacturers' points, and GTO Out Nowhere would run out of the point circle in 10th with the Peugeot 308 GTI. Racing Heart GT, after some minor incidents, would end up in 11th in the Privateer Subaru WRX. HP Pinder would end up in 12th, DJ Yuko in 13th in the Speedtrack Motorsports Master 3. Harry K5 would round out the people who finished in the Pinder, with Blitz Skyline R34 and Azo9K both retiring. I believe the Bay Racing Scirocco would lose out due to lag, and the Twitch Motorsports Lexus 350 would retire due to its injuries. Anyways, on to the driver rankings after round 5 and 6, and we have a leading champion. It is Microlin 100 who leads by 1 point over Prod Forza 4 AMG. Yeah, a pretty close battle up there in the championship. Rhino GT4 would go into 3rd, taking that spot from EVR Invisible AK, who would unfortunately drop out of round number 5, otherwise he would be pretty much up there. There is a rather long break between me and EVR Invisible AK, as I stick in 5th place with 42 points. Harry K5, the Pinketeer, would unfortunately score no points whatsoever in this round, leaving him in 6th and tying him up with a Racing Heart GT on 27 points. Prod EKR, despite being a newcomer to the series, would instantly gain 7th place in the championship with 25 points after pretty good results in rounds 5 and 6. Afternoon 7 is in 8th with 23 points. In 9th, GMT 1996 in 19 points. And in 10th is a GTO Out of Nowhere with 12 points. So yeah, a pretty exciting championship picture once again. Really managed to shake things up in there. As we continue onwards, down to the bottom, HP Pinder is in 11th with 5 points, Blitz Skyline R34 is in 12th with 3 points, DJ Yuko and CR27 Gaming tie for 2 points, and unfortunately Azza is last with 1 point with his rather spectacular injuries in those couple of rounds. Rather unfortunate driver really when you consider it. In the manufacturers' rankings, it is still BMW who holds the top spot with 65 points, with Volkswagen being quite close behind in 2nd with 60 points. Ford has 35 points. up from Honda. Despite only making their debut in this race thanks to very good races, they would instantly go into 4th with 25 points in the manufacturer's rankings. Subaru would not be too far behind them though, would buy just 1 point in 5th with 24 points. Peugeot have 13 points, and tying for 7th is both Lexus and Mazda, who currently have 2 points in the manufacturer's rankings. So there we go, and that was a Lime Rock rounds 5 and 6. Overall, while it may have been some chaotic racing, it certainly did deliver some pretty good battles in between, and it certainly did serve us some lessons on what to do in the future. For rounds 7 and 8, we will not be heading to such a short course. Instead, we will be heading to the Nürburgring GP course. This will, of course, take place on the 30th of June 2017 at 11 PM British Summer Time. Rhino GT4, as usual, should be streaming on Twitch. There is a link to that down below in the description. And as usual, we have coverage from both Rhino GT4 and HP Pinder, which is down below in the description as well. As I said at the top of the video, if you'd like to get involved in ETCC, there is a video in the description in which you can do so. With that all being said and done, friends, thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you at the Nürburgring GP circuit, not the Nordschleife. We are never, ever doing Nordschleife in any racing series. Farewell.